or work with a child who constantly strives for the ultimate perfection. They do great work in their book and then they rub the whole thing out because it's not good enough. Or they delete the whole thing and start completely again. And that's really frustrating because for you as the adult, you're like, but that was great. And they're struggling because what they see as great isn't great enough. And that's a really debilitating part of perfectionism. And for some children, it can be really, really negative impacting on their schooling. So what can you do? Well, often perfectionism impacts their neatness, it impacts their organisation. Do you know a child whose pencil case is always immaculately lined up, everything in the right place, everything has its spot pencils always sharpened, red pen is next to the blue pen? At home, I've seen adults where I go to visit their house and they keep their house incredibly tidy, unlike mine. So that's one way that it can impact, but it does impact in school, and it really does seem to impact in any written tasks, because obviously you could write number 5, is it just right, is it just inside the square, and then rub it out, rewrite it, and that can slow down the work. So for a really bright child, this is really impacting how much work they can get through and how much work they can prove that they know. So what can we do? So I've got some strategies. So one of them, if you type. So if you're typing a task, no one knows how many times you've deleted a word, changed it, edited it, and made it better. So that editing process isn't visible to anybody who's now looking at the finished product. So that can help to reduce some. Now it depends on the age of the child and the type of task you're being asking them to do. For some tasks you can write on with digital ink onto something like OneNote, and OneNote has the facility to transfer that writing into text. It can even do mathematical equations, so it's actually quite a powerful tool. So that might be something you want to have a look at. It's quite simple to work out. What else can you do? So for some students, having a second book that they draft into and they only hand you the finalised one. But just be careful with that one, because if they keep perfecting the draft, they may never get to the version that they hand over to you to mark as the teacher. So make sure you focus on the effort the child has put in, not just focusing on the quality of their work, because if you're focusing on the quality, they're going to be possibly heightened even more to make it even more perfect for you. Help the child understand what they can and can't control. So for some children, they think they can control everything about their work. So things like computers dying. It happens. They will need strategies then on how they're going to manage that, what they're going to do, how they're going to come back from that. Can they get that work back from somewhere? Is it restorable? And then also, what are the strategies to prevent that happening in the long term? One of my favourite strategies is thinking about the size of the problem. So when you're thinking about, I've spelt the word said incorrectly. I could rub it out and I could put S-A-I-D instead of S-E-D. Now, how big a problem is that really? Now, for a child with perfectionism, it could be so bad that they rip their whole page out and start again. Now, is that really an appropriate response to the size of that problem? Right, so there's a really nice chart I've attached to my blog post which goes through what's the problem, how big is it, and you get to see whether it's a big problem, a middle-sized problem, or a small problem. Small problems are problems you can solve yourself. Big problems are problems where you need probably an ambulance, the police, maybe the fire brigade. You need lots and lots of people, certainly professionals that are expert in dealing with big problems. Middle size problems you're going to need an adult to help you figure out, or another friend if you're an adult. You can't probably figure it out on your own. So we need to think that, what's a small problem? What's the size of the reaction? So ripping out your page is quite a large reaction for spelling a word wrong. So that's a really good way of starting just to put things in perspective, and you can use it for lots and lots of different areas of social and emotional development. But that's a really good one that might work really well if your child is really perfectionist about writing things down, just making them realise actually it's not a massive problem, it's not a big issue, it's something small, we can just fix it, we can move on. Adults make mistakes all the time, and we just need to model to the kids that we make mistakes and talk through our mistakes. Oh no, I've messed that up, well this is what I'm going to do about it. And often we do that in our head, but if we can actually model out loud to the kids what we're doing to problem solve in our head, how we're going to solve the fact that we've made a mistake, that's really valuable for them in terms of learning how to process and how to deal with their own mistakes and failures. I recently worked with a great guy who had this theory that everybody could make 14 mistakes a day and there was no problem with that. That making mistakes was perfectly fine, and he had this rule of 14. I don't know where the rule of 14 came from, but I know I've used it with lots of students and say, well, have you made 14 mistakes today? No? Well, carry on. Nothing to worry about. So modelling healthy ways of making mistakes is really important. And then challenging their thoughts. Is this really a bad mistake? Is this a small mistake? Focus on what they're doing well and helping to build that growth mindset, that yet. So if you're 4 and the kid's upset they can't drive a car, no, you can't drive a car yet. Okay, there's lots of things I still can't do, but that's only a yet. If I want to do them, I could put my mind to it and I could do it. So yet is a really, really powerful word because there's lots of things that they're going, but I can't yet. And that's a really, really good word. So then when they do achieve that, you can go, okay, so we've done that. You said you couldn't do that. We said you couldn't do it yet, but look what you can do now. So that's a really, really powerful word from the work of Carol Dweck. And finally, if this is becoming such a problem that it's hindering school, it's hindering home, it's causing massive meltdowns, lots of tears, then you probably need to seek some professional advice. And if you're umming and ahhing on the borderline, do I, don't I, you probably should. As I've said in all my previous videos, and probably many more to come, that seeking professionalist help before it gets too difficult, before things get too ingrained and too difficult, is definitely the way to go. Early intervention is always better. It doesn't matter what it is that we're dealing with, early intervention is definitely better to go. So I hope it's given you some tips and strategies on how you can cope with a child who's a bit of a perfectionist in your class.